Last year there was a study that came out, and this map is a result of it. And what they did in this study was looked at all the human-mediated factors that impact the ocean. And some of the surprising or shocking things that came out of this and from this, so anything kind of in the orange and up category is a medium to extremely high impact that we have had directly on the oceans. And you can see that, well, I can tell you there's 43% of the oceans are impacted at a medium or above level. Not surprisingly, what also came out of this is that the number one impact that we've had on our oceans is through fisheries. I wanted to talk and start taking a look at more specifically how fisheries impact the oceans. And the first way or one of the ways is habitat damage. It's the methods that we choose to catch our seafood or to farm our seafood and the impacts that they have on the ocean. And this is kind of an interesting photo. Looking at right here is a factory bottom trawler. This would be what would be commonly used, well, it was used for the East Coast Atlantic cod fishery very commonly. And these are massive, massive boats that go out into the open ocean and can reach down over a mile deep. So there really is very little of the seafloor that's left untouched by these boats. When the net's closed up like that, it can stand 5 or 6 stories tall. When the net's open and dragging the bottom of the ocean, the mouth of it is about the size of 3 football fields, and inside you can fit up to a dozen jumbo jets. Incredibly damaging method of fishery. This is an incredible picture. This was actually, somebody found this when they were browsing through Google Earth. So this was actually a satellite image that was found on Google Earth. And this is the mouth, the Yangtze River Delta. And as you can see, if you look at the lineup of boats along here, the first series of boats are about a good 2 or 3 boat lengths apart. The next series of boats, I've lost my pointer, but right in there, kind of fit right perfectly in between. And then this series fit right perfectly in between that. And there's actually one more lineup of boats behind them. So there's absolutely no area of the bottom here that's left untouched. The North Sea in Europe, every square, at its height anyway, every square centimeter of the North Sea of Europe was trawled completely clean 7 times a year. So there's absolutely no chance for any of this, the sponges, the corals, that type of thing, to grow back onto the bottom of the ocean. That's now 17 years ago that we haven't been fishing Atlantic cod, and yet the fish haven't come back. So what's happening? Why haven't these fish come back? I mean, 17 years, we should start seeing an increase in the cod populations if we're not fishing them. Well, one of the things that we didn't fully understand is that juvenile cod heavily rely on the habitat, on the structure at the bottom of the ocean as a nursery ground, a place to hide from larger fish so that they have somewhere to hide so they don't get picked off and they can grow into an adult fish, and of course we can catch them and eat them again. So if we take a look at what happens after trawling, you have all this structure on the bottom of the ocean, great place if you're a juvenile cod to hide. Once the trawlers come through, it's completely clean under there, and there's no place for any of these fish to hide, and of course they just get picked off. Another major problem in the oceans is a problem of bycatch, and this is when we're looking at wild capture fisheries. And bycatch essentially is anything we didn't intend to catch. So a classic example would be dolphins in tuna nets. 25 to 30% of what is reported globally gets wasted as bycatch. So these are animals that are pulled out of the ocean, they're killed, wasted, tossed back as seagull food. It's a massive, massive problem. And as we look at growing populations and an increased demand and need for protein sources and good healthy protein sources, this is obviously unacceptable. Something like bottom trawl is a massively problematic fishery, and this is an interesting photo here as well. This is Louisiana shrimp or prawn fishery, and what's happened here in this picture is again a bottom trawl, and what they've done is they've dumped their catch right on the deck of the boat there. So if you look really carefully, you'll see there's all kinds of stuff in here. There's squid and starfish and all different types of fish species and crab. And what's happening is this guy sitting on the deck of the boat here is picking out what they're keeping and putting it into this basket. And the rest of this guy over here is shoveling overboard. For every 1 pound of shrimp that they're catching between 7 and 12 pounds of bycatch associated with it as well. This is something called longlining, and specifically this is called pelagic longlining. Very, very common in more tropical waters, not as common. Typically up here we're doing a bottom longline in temperate waters. But this method of fishing, these strings of baited hooks are floated out in the middle of the ocean, and these strings are massive. They can be 50, 60 miles long. They're floated out in the middle of the ocean and left for 12, 24 hours to soak so that they can fill up all those hooks. Now let's say, for example, you were going for yellowfin tuna, and you've had this whole string of baited hooks out there, 50 miles out in the ocean. What are the chances that a yellowfin tuna is going to make it to that bait before anything else out in the open ocean? Out of 100 hooks, maybe what, 5 times? So when the fishermen go back, bring in the net, again, even the most well-intentioned fishermen, they're unreleasable and they're wasted. Incredibly devastating fishery, but I guarantee that most of the tuna that you see is caught in this manner. We've started to do a great job on protecting critical habitat areas on land. We speak of land now in terms of wildlife and wilderness that we need to protect. But we're not there yet in the ocean, and I think it might be that air-water interface that's kind of clouded. We can't see in there very well, so we haven't changed our minds and shifted our minds in the same way. We still talk about the ocean as stocks that we need to manage instead of wilderness and wildlife that we need to protect. A fur trader, let's say, if he was going to string out 100-mile or 60-mile string of baited leg hold traps in the forest to catch his fox, and just anything that came by that got caught in there, the grizzly bears, the cougars, the wolves, there's no way that we would stand for that today. The other major problem, and probably one that's the most obvious, is simply overfishing. We simply take too much, and this is when we're talking about industrial, commercialized, and industrial scale fisheries. This is really a big issue. At least 75% of the species that we fish currently in the oceans are in trouble. 90% of all large predatory species, the tunas, the swordfish, the shark, are gone. We're fishing the last 10% of these large species. So what are the solutions to some of these things? I think having things like marine protected areas and marine conservation areas are key. Obviously, Gwaii Haanas is a key thing. And this is something that we could learn a lot from New Zealand. New Zealand, many years ago, the fishermen fought the idea of a marine protected area. Well, they put one in place anyway. And all of the catches all around this marine protected area, the fishermen started catching more. And now the fishermen are demanding more marine protected areas in New Zealand, and it's been a massive success story. It's hugely important for us to keep biodiversity and keep species and protect the species in our oceans. There's also regulatory reform and lobbying the government, but what we've really keyed in on with the Oceanwise program is market transformation. We're trying to change and create a market for sustainable seafood, and we believe this may be the most powerful way that we can actually impact fisheries right at the water level. People always ask me, well, why is the Vancouver Aquarium even interested in the eating of seafood? I mean, we do a good job of displaying it, but we don't often talk about eating them because they're our friends, so we don't. But the reason is because it comes right down to our mission statement, and that is to achieve conservation of the aquatic world through research, education, interpretation, display, and direct action. So something like Oceanwise falls under a couple of these categories, certainly research, certainly education, but ultimately what it is what we call a direct action program, something that we can all do in our everyday lives that will have a positive impact on the marine environment, and that's what we're after.